I can't believe you have such a low educational background. I'm disappointed. You're not a good match for our family. So please don't come to the wedding. Hearing this from my sister's fiancé, I decided to be considerate of my sister and stay away from the wedding. My sister was highly educated, having worked as a bureaucrat. However, on the day of the wedding, if we go by your logic, shouldn't you be the one not attending? My sister's words left her fiancé flustered. He still didn't know my real profession or education. I'm Steve, and I grew up in an orphanage since my parents passed away when I was very young. As a child, I loved reading picture books for elementary students that were available at the orphanage. Even if I couldn't read the words, I enjoyed seeing the unknown world through pictures. When I was around 4 years old and could read, I started reading novels. Children's novels often used easier words, so even if it had difficult words, I was able to understand the story as a whole. I would ask the staff about words and phrases I didn't understand, and by the time I was 5, I was able to understand most of the things written. Around that time, I started to get interested in numbers, and it became a daily routine to help the elementary school kids with their homework. When I turned 6, my adoptive father, Michael Johnson, found me. Though I had a strong interest in studying, I was terrible at sports. Maybe because of that, I was small for my age. When Michael visited the orphanage, he saw me studying with the elementary school kids and asked the staff, "Is that boy also in elementary school?" Learning my age and that I could read and do arithmetic, he said, "Such a bright child. It would be a waste for him to not receive a proper education." He decided to take me in. Michael and his wife, Jessica, were over 35 and had no children. Back then, infertility treatments were expensive and not well understood. Both of them had discussed and decided, let's give up on having our own children, and chose to adopt from the orphanage. They took me in and raised me strictly yet kindly. They didn't spoil me because I was adopted but treated me like their own, praising and scolding me when needed. When I was 7, one day they called me over. "We're having a baby." I was in shock. I knew they adopted me because they couldn't have children. Did this mean I would no longer be needed once their own child was born? My fears, however, were unfounded. "Don't worry. You're our son. Even though you weren't born from my body, you're just as precious. That won't change, even with a new baby." Their words reassured me. True to their word, they continued to raise me as their son. The baby was a girl. She was a lovely girl who looked like our parents, with big, bright eyes, and a cheerful smile. "Look, she smiles just like Steve." Yes, she does. Their words made me happier than anything, and I adored my sister, Lisa, as we grew up together. About 8 years after Lisa was born, our mother suddenly fell ill and was rushed to the hospital. My father told me to stay home with Lisa while he went to the hospital. "Will Mom be okay?" Holding Lisa, who was trembling, I could only say, "She'll be fine," feeling helpless. When my father returned, he told us that Mom had been diagnosed with a rare disease. He was still trying to process the news himself and couldn't explain the details. Though she was hospitalized for treatment, there was no established cure for her disease. Experimental treatments and new drugs were options, but they were incredibly expensive. We weren't poor, but we weren't rich either. Of course, we couldn't come up with such a huge amount of money right away. "Dad, I need to talk to you." A few days later, I approached my stepfather to discuss something important. "I want to transfer to a night school. That way, I can work during the day and help cover Mom's medical expenses." "Steve, I appreciate your concern. But you're only 16. Leave your mother's care to me and focus on what you want to do." I hadn't expected him to agree easily, so his response was within my expectations. "Dad, I'm deeply grateful to you and Mom for taking in an orphan like me, and raising me with so much love. Without you too, I wouldn't be who I am today. That's why I want to give back. I want to do something for our family, even if it's just a little." "Steve, studying can be done anytime, but helping Mom can only be done now. If I don't act now, I'll regret it. So, please let me work for our family." As I bowed my head earnestly, my adoptive father sighed deeply, looking troubled. Then he nodded, albeit reluctantly, and said, Alright. Alright, I understand. But promise me you won't overdo it. Yes, I promise. Thank you, Dad. He said he was moved by my determination. A few days later, my adoptive father introduced me to President Smith, an old friend of his, whom I'd met a few times before. I told President Smith that I wanted to work for my family's sake, and he agreed to let me work as an office assistant. During the day, I worked as an office assistant, and at night, I attended the night school I had transferred to. As my adoptive father had warned, it was tough at first. I struggled to keep up, sometimes falling asleep at the entrance, without even eating when I got home exhausted. It took me a while to find my own pace. But the night school was interesting, with people from various backgrounds and ages, and I learned a lot just from talking to them. Seeing how tired I was, my sister Lisa started to learn how to cook and prepared delicious meals for me when I got home, which motivated me even more. Whenever I had a bit of free time, I visited my mother in the hospital or played with Lisa. 2 years passed in this way, and I graduated from school. When I went to greet President Smith with my diploma, he said, "You did well. I didn't think you could work and graduate at the same time without even complaining. Steve, you've got real determination." He praised me and entrusted me with more responsibilities at work from the next day. Meanwhile, Lisa also grew up and became a high school student. She studied hard on her own and got into a prestigious school while also working part-time. Lisa, if you keep working and studying so hard, you'll wear yourself out. Why not take a break and hang out with your friends sometimes? I'm fine. You were just as busy every day, weren't you, Steve? Well, that's true. I couldn't argue, given that I had done the same. Besides, I can attend the school I like now, because you and Dad worked so hard to support the family. I can't slack off for your sake or for Mom's. I decided to do this, so I'll do my best. All right. Just don't push yourself too hard. Thanks, Steve. It felt strange to tell Lisa the same thing Dad had told me a few years ago. After that, Lisa balanced work and study as she had said she would. She managed to get into a national university. However, by that time, our mother's condition had worsened significantly. We tried various treatments and medications, but nothing seemed to help, and all we could do was watch her suffer. Then, after Lisa's coming-of-age ceremony, Mom passed away peacefully in her sleep, holding a photo of Lisa in her dress. Even after the 7-day mourning period, the house remained eerily quiet. To support my family and help with my adoptive mother's medical expenses, I worked desperately for several years with that in mind. But I couldn't help feeling there might have been more I could have done for her. I wondered if there was a way to alleviate her suffering. Seeing Lisa cry in front of Mom's photo made me feel frustrated and helpless. Dad. What's up? I've found something I want to do. There are many others suffering from the same rare disease as my adoptive mother. I want to save them with my own hands. I want to become someone who can help. But as I thought about it, I realized my age was coming close to 30. Is it too late to start now? It's not too late. Steve, you've always been brilliant. It won't be easy, but I know you can do it. My adoptive father encouraged me gently, and I was grateful for his support. A few years later, I found myself in Germany, having passed 40. I had heard that research on the rare disease my adoptive mother had suffered from was advancing in Germany, so I moved there without hesitation. Meanwhile, in the States, Lisa had landed a job as a diplomat. Surrounded by male colleagues, she was building her career and working hard. Because of our different schedules, we didn't keep in touch often, but one day, Lisa reached out to me. I'm getting married. I want to introduce you to my fiancé. Can you come back home? Lisa, who had never been in a serious relationship even after turning 30, finally had good news. Naturally, I was overjoyed and immediately discussed it with my workplace. I managed to get some time off and arranged to return home temporarily. On the day I was to meet Lisa and her fiancé, I headed to the private room in the restaurant Lisa had reserved, where the two of them were already waiting. Hey, Steve. Lisa, it's been a while. Yeah. Oh, let me introduce you. This is my fiancé, Andrew. I'm Andrew. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. I'm Steve, Lisa's brother. Andrew, Lisa's fiancé, seemed like a genuinely nice guy. Apparently, they had met at work and started dating. Our conversation with Andrew was lively, and the atmosphere remained friendly throughout. After we finished eating, Lisa excused herself to go to the restroom. It was then that Andrew, who had seemed like such a nice guy, suddenly narrowed his eyes. Lisa said you're the brother she deeply respects. But you went to a night school? What? I'm disappointed to learn you have such a low educational background. You don't match our family. Please don't attend our wedding. Andrew waved his hand dismissively at me. What do you mean? Despite still wearing the same pleasant smile he had while sitting next to Lisa, his words now mock me. What do I mean? Exactly what I said. My family has been in the government service for generations. Only the elite are in our family. How could we tolerate a low-educated relative in our lineage? Haha, it's unbearable. As Andrew laughed mockingly, and I sat in silent disbelief, Lisa returned and said, "Shall we head home," bringing the meeting to an end. I considered quietly returning to Germany, but worried about Lisa's future, so I decided to talk to her before leaving. It's hard to say this, but I began, directly telling Lisa what Andrew had said. Lisa's eyes widened in shock before she quietly seethed with anger. Steve, I'm sorry Andrew said such awful things. It's not your fault, Lisa. I'm not upset about it. I'm more concerned about you. I didn't doubt Lisa's judgment, but I worried about her marrying someone who could say such things to her brother. Thank you for telling me. Don't worry about me. His parents have been very kind, and you know I'm not the type to stay silent. So, don't worry and please come to the wedding. I want you to see me as a bride. Lisa. I wanted to see my only sister on her big day. But I was torn, fearing my presence might cause her to be treated poorly by her in-laws. The wedding day arrived. I visited the bride's room in the church. Lisa, you look beautiful. Thank you, Steve. Lisa's embarrassed smile in her wedding dress was so beautiful it brought tears to my eyes, while my adoptive father was already bawling. I wish Mom could have seen this, he said, and the three of us laughed through our tears. After a while, my adoptive father left the room to wash his face, and as if on cue, there was a knock on the door, and Andrew walked in. Lisa. Andrew. In his tuxedo, Andrew looked at me with an obvious expression of disdain. Steve, I didn't know you were here. I had decided to skip the wedding for Lisa's sake, but I couldn't resist seeing her in her wedding dress. I had taken a long leave of absence and planned to enjoy my time in the States. This is a once-in-a-lifetime moment for my sister. I'll leave soon, so please forgive me. Seeing me smile, Andrew let out a deep sigh. However, seeing this, Lisa glared sharply at Andrew. Andrew, no matter what you say, Steve will attend the wedding. Lisa, it's okay. I don't need to. It's not okay. Andrew, if you say anything more against my brother, I'll call off this wedding. Why would you do that? Because, who could marry someone who insults their family? Lisa stood firm, and Andrew, clearly not expecting this, looked flustered before suddenly getting defensive. But it's true that your brother has a low educational background. Aren't you embarrassed to have a relative whose highest education is from a night school? I'm not embarrassed at all. Lisa's hand reached out to Andrew for a slap. The sound of Lisa's slap echoed through the room. Andrew, eyes wide in shock, held his cheek and slowly looked at Lisa. Lisa, trembling with anger, took a deep breath to calm herself, and I put a hand on her shoulder to comfort her. Shouldn't you be the one not attending? What? The one who should skip the wedding is you, Andrew. What do you mean? Steve is working as a doctor in Germany now. What? By your logic, Steve's education is from a university, and it's a German one. Andrew's eyes widened as he looked back and forth between Lisa and me. After our mother passed away, I aspired to become a doctor. I consulted many people and set a 3-year deadline to pass the medical school entrance exam. President Smith allowed me to keep my position and adjusted my workload, so I could focus on my studies under the condition that if I didn't make it in 3 years, I'd give up. I studied desperately and got accepted into medical school. But then I heard that research on the rare disease was advancing in Germany. And I immediately consulted my adoptive father. "Go for it," he said, handing me a substantial amount of money. President Smith also increased my severance pay as a farewell gift, and both of them sent me off warmly. Everyone supported me as I chose to forego medical school in the States and move to Germany. With their hopes and expectations engraved in my heart, I set off for Germany, determined to succeed. It takes at least 8 years to obtain a medical license in Germany. Now, I've finally earned my medical license and am working while being part of a research team studying rare diseases. That can't be true. It's impossible. Andrew shouted repeatedly, unable to accept my story. I won't acknowledge it. I just won't. Besides, why didn't you say anything at our first meeting? You could have defended yourself. I didn't go to a German university for the sake of a degree. I had something I really wanted to do, and becoming a doctor was necessary for that. That's all. What does that mean? The degree came as a result. I'm not interested in it, and I didn't see a need to mention it. Andrew collapsed into a chair, seemingly at a loss for words. Why do you judge people solely based on their educational background? Lisa asked him, and after a moment, he began to speak haltingly. Andrew's parents and siblings were all graduates of prestigious national universities, while he was the only one who had attended a private university. Growing up, Andrew was constantly told he was a failure because he couldn't keep up academically. Even though it was a well-known private university, he was labeled a failure because he had enrolled in the department with the lowest entrance requirements. And this led to his deep-seated inferiority complex about his education. However, whenever he attended social gatherings, he was popular because of his university's name. Despite his family's disparagement, he started to believe he might be considered an elite by society at large. So, he ended up believing that people only cared about educational background rather than a person's actual abilities. He started thinking that academic credentials were everything. In the middle of Andrew's story, my adoptive father, who had returned to the room, spoke up. Do you still believe education is everything, even after seeing Steve? Steve attended a night school, but that was because he chose to work and study simultaneously to support our family. Is that something to be ashamed of? No matter how much you belittle him, he is my proud son. That's just an idealistic view. Lisa frowned at Andrew's sullen response. And what if it is? My brother and I have worked hard to get to where we are today. We've done it for our family. Can you only maintain your pride by putting others down? Seeing Andrew struggle to respond, I added, I can understand feeling pressured when those around you are accomplished. Though my circumstances were different, I had feared I would be unwanted when Lisa was born, thinking my place in the family was threatened. However, my family accepted me along with my insecurities and treated me with genuine love and care. So when my adoptive mother fell ill and we needed money for her treatment, I feared of becoming a burden. I hated the thought of being abandoned and left alone again, so I struggled in my own way to contribute. It's laughable. A high schooler could live alone if they wanted to, but I was scared of being alone and losing my family again. But I was fortunate to have a supportive family, which is why I am here today. Steve. I didn't know you felt that way. Seeing Lisa cry, I handed her a handkerchief to wipe her tears, worried her makeup would be ruined. Next to her, Andrew murmured unexpectedly. I just wanted someone to acknowledge me. Andrew. My family never did. No matter how hard I tried, they always saw me as a failure. But Lisa, you acknowledged me. His hands were trembling as he spoke, and Lisa gently placed her hand over his. Lisa never cared about my educational background. I knew that. Despite being a graduate of a national university, she treated me as an equal. It made me happy. As I got to know her, I fell in love. When I introduced her to my family, they praised me. But I feared they'd find out about Steve's night school background and say something again. Not that it excuses my behavior. It's just an excuse. Andrew stood up and faced me. Steve, I was wrong. It doesn't matter whether you went to medical school or not. You can't judge a person by their education. What matters is their character. I realize that now. Steve, Mr. Johnson, I'm truly sorry. It's all right, as long as you understand. I should have said something sooner.
Lisa, now I understand why you respect your brother so much.
Of course. He's my wonderful brother. Lisa, I'm really sorry. Seeing Andrew's heartfelt apology and Lisa's smile, my adoptive father and I left the room. 6 months later, Lisa and Andrew successfully held their wedding and seems to be doing well. Before returning to Germany, I had several meals with my adoptive father and the couple. Andrew seemed to be completely under Lisa's thumb, which amused me. It seems that slap had a significant impact, and I was worried it might have disrupted the balance of their relationship. However, seeing Lisa's happy smile reassured me that they would probably manage just fine. Lisa was no longer a concern. As for me,
President Smith took me out drinking several times, saying,
"Since you're here in the States, let's hang out." We talked about work, old times, and many other topics, enjoying our time together. During one of these conversations, he asked, "You seem to worry about Lisa a lot, but what about you?" which caught me off guard. "Well, You're a doctor, but there's no sign of a woman in your life. I've only been working." "Really, you've always been too serious, only looking straight ahead." The day after having that conversation, President Smith suddenly introduced me to his daughter. "Nice to meet you." "Hi, nice to meet you." "President Smith, what's going on here?" "Oh, nothing much. Since you don't have anyone, I thought my daughter might be a good match. Just talk to her, you two might hit it off." "Well, if that's the case."
Apparently, President Smith had been talking about me even while I was in Germany, and his daughter had become interested.
Her name was Sarah. She worked as a flight attendant for an airline. She mostly handled international flights and often traveled to Germany, so we hit it off immediately. Our conversation flowed so well that we didn't notice President Smith had left, and we both laughed about it. Since Sarah happened to be in the States for a while, we took the opportunity to go out to various places together. As my vacation for Lisa's wedding came to an end, and I was preparing to return to Germany, I felt an unexpected pang of sadness. Sarah ran up to me and said, "It's okay. We'll see each other again soon." Before I could respond, it was time to board my flight back to Germany. Back in Germany, as I resumed my usual routine and reminisced about my time in the States, one day the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, there stood Sarah. "See? I told you we'd see each other again soon."